My name is Betsy Ionkoya. I'm with the Early Childhood TA Center here at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I want to say welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to welcome you to the first in our webinar series on the DEC and the DEC recommended practices for engaging families. This is our first webinar and we are so happy to have you with us. I want to welcome our ECTA partners who will be joining me and sharing information with you today. First, I'd like to introduce Peggy Camp. Peggy is the Executive Director for the Division for Early Childhood of the Council for Exceptional Children. And Stephanie Moss is our partner with the Region B Parent Technical Assistance Center and Parent to Parent of Georgia. I'm so happy they're able to be with us today. As I said, this is the first in a series of 4 webinars that we've designed specifically to orient parent center staff across the United States to the recommended practices and to related resources that can be used in their work with families of young children with disabilities. So the first 3 will be a lot about the recommended practices and those tools. And then our 4th and final webinar, we're going to be unveiling what we believe is a really exciting opportunity for an aRPy ambassadors that's going to be designed specifically for parent centers. So we are looking forward to having you join us throughout the summer. Just a little bit of housekeeping to let you know that all of the participant lines are currently muted and that all of our webinars in this series are being recorded. They are going to be recorded and they will be archived on the ECTA Center site so that you can refer back to them and share them with your colleagues as appropriate. I do want to say that it may take about a week or so to get those up, but if anyone would like to have a copy of the PowerPoint slides before they are posted on our website, you'll see my email address at the end of the presentation and you can email me and I'll be happy to send you out a copy. Even though your lines are muted, we will at some point in the presentation open up the lines and give you an opportunity to ask questions. But on your menu bar for the Zoom room, you will see a little box that says Q&A. If you have any questions during the time that we're sharing, feel free to go ahead and post them there and we will be happy to address those before we open up the lines for more questions. There's also a chat box feature so you can share chats with the folks who are presenting, but also all of the participants as well. I want to kind of share a little bit about the objectives for this first in the series. We're really going to use this as an opportunity to provide information about the Division for Early Childhood, that we refer to as DEC. We're going to describe the purpose of the DEC recommended practices and how they came about. And we also want to provide some information about why DEC is important for families and to let you know where these practices can be found and all of the supporting materials that are there to support the practices where they can be found as well. We are going to first go to Peggy Kemp, and she's going to share some information about DEC and the recommended practices. Peggy?
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I am really happy to be able to join you today to talk about DEC, or the Division for Early Childhood, and grateful for you taking the time out of your day to be with us. DEC is an international organization whose members work with or on behalf of young children with special needs or disabilities and their families. The Division for Early Childhood was started in 1963 by a group of volunteers who included family members who were particularly concerned about the development of very young children from 0 to age 8. DEC is one of 17 divisions of our parent organization, the Council for Exceptional Children. The Council for Exceptional Children is the largest professional organization dedicated to improving educational success for individuals with disabilities, gifts, and talents. DEC was the first division to actually define an age group rather than a category of disability, and that's still true to this day. So, as we advance, one of the main purposes for us, our conversation over the next 4 webinars, is really to talk about what DEC, what the partnerships look like between DEC and families. DEC has, from the very beginning, looked to families as partners and promotes policies that support the whole family, including the child with the identified disability or gifted, talented, special needs. DEC promotes both practices that enhance the development of young children who have or are at risk for developmental delays and disabilities, but also promotes policies that absolutely support the full family. DEC has a family committee that is in some ways new because we have reformalized it over the past 3 years, but always been an intricate piece in terms of integrating the family voice at DEC. But the family committee now is very active and an official part of the DEC structure. Our family committee supports the entire organization in promoting authentic engagement of families and ensuring that families are active members of all the DEC activities. For example, family members are involved in conferences, institutes that are presented across the country, not only as participants, but as planners, session presenters. Family members of children with disabilities are involved in national committees, subdivisions, our community of practice work. They also participate in developing our resources, our publications, our products as reviewers, authors, and co-authors. Through recent activity, family members have become part of some of our partnership work with technical assistance centers, and we have family cohorts that really look to help support families in becoming a greater part of the CSPD process. In addition, family members have been nominated to our executive board. In the past, we've had family members nominated at the member-at-large position. This year, for the first time, we have a family member leading us in the presidential rotation, so that that leader will be in place over the next 4 years. We're certain that this level of engagement truly contributes to better outcomes for young children, their families, and for professionals as we grow in our partnership with each family that we work together with. So for those of you who are maybe new to the Division for Early Childhood, who are DEC members? Who makes up the DEC membership? Well, as you heard, family members are absolutely a part of DEC from 1963 forward. DEC serves as the voice for early intervention and early childhood special education. So in addition to family members, membership in DEC is really quite varied. And a little bit different than our Council for Exceptional Children. DEC has members of all practitioners, so not only educators, but also physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, etc. join DEC to learn more about serving very young children together on teams. Our members also include higher education faculty, their students, both at the master's, undergraduate, and doctoral level, researchers, policymakers, and other specialists that offer training and technical assistance. DEC members are active at local, state, and national levels. We do have a group of subdivisions, not in every state, though that's the eventual target, but in many states. And many of those subdivisions also include family members as part of the team. So now that you know a little bit more about CEC or DEC as an organization within CEC and some of our overarching principles, we'd love to talk to you a bit about what are the DEC recommended practices. So let me share some of that information. The DEC recommended practices, the primary goal is to inform and improve the quality of services provided to young children with or at risk for disabilities, delays in their families. The practices are meant to be a guiding document. The word recommended was chosen because we also see them as an ever-changing process. Recommended practices should not be static. They should change as the research change, as the wisdom from practitioners and families inform us, as some of our model demonstration sites, all of the things that we consider evidence-based practice. As the law changes, the Division for Early Childhood recommended practices should evolve and change, and that has happened over time. We have several revisions that have led us to our current revision of the recommended practices. The practices don't cover everything that a practitioner might need to know, but they do represent the most essential and the highest impact practices. While the practices are organized into distinct topic areas, when you take a look at them, they should be viewed as holistically, just like children are not arms and legs and other ways to think about practices. The practices look to serve the child holistically. So as you view them, you'll note how related the content is across the topics. Some other parameters to think about for the recommended practices. When you read a recommended practice, it should be something that's observable, meaning you should see it in action in your home, in a classroom. This is what could be going on in the best of circumstances. And so they're all written in an active voice, and they indicate what the practitioner will do. The practices are appropriate for all categories. They are not disability specific, and they can be delivered in all settings, especially natural and inclusive environments. While DEC serves 0 to age 8, the DEC recommended practices cover only 0 through age 5. There's another set of practices called high leverage practices that take K through 3 into account, and they're available at CEC. The practices are not meant to duplicate any existing guiding documents or standards, but they're intended to build upon that work. In particular, the standards are intended to build upon the developmentally appropriate practices at NAEYC. So that means that we assume that practices are grounded in what we already know about how to promote young children's development and learning. And the DEC recommended practices are integrated and infused with the developmentally appropriate practices. So the next question we'd really like to address is, why do we need practices? What do practices offer to you as family members, to practitioners, and eventually how do they impact the outcomes of the children in our programs and in our families? The practices provide guidance to practitioners and families about the most effective way to improve the learning outcomes and promote development of young children. The recommended practices support developing and learning for all children. They're not limited to children that are eligible for IDEA. However, they support children's access and participation in inclusive settings, natural environments, and address cultural, linguistic inability and diversity. So in a nutshell, we look at the practices as a guiding force, as a companion document with developmentally appropriate practices, as an essential tool for practitioners and for families to both know what high-level practices look like, and be able to have strong conversations together in carrying out those practices during daily routines and activities of homes and classrooms. So with that, Betsy will give us a bit of information about how the aRPys came to be.
Thank you for giving us that introduction and overview for DEC, Peggy. So where did the DEC recommended practices come from? So the DEC published the first set of recommended practices in 1993. Those particular practices were generated by several focus groups who selected practices for consideration, and then they went out for a field validation. And those practices were in existence for a number of years. In the year 2000, DEC updated that set of practices. They were updated and revised, and that was through a grant from the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. There was a complete literature review. There were new focus groups that came about to look at those new practices, and they also included a new field validation for those, and several products supporting that version of the practices were produced, and some of them are still being used. They're all really wonderful. So where are we today? You know, as the field has continued to evolve and as new research has emerged, the recommended practices have continued to be revisited and revised in order to remain current and relevant to the field. In the year 2012, DEC created a Recommended Practices Commission to guide the next revisions process. The members of that group, known as the commissioners, were representative of all of the diversity of the DEC membership types. As you can see here, there were members who were university faculty, there were family members, practitioners, professional development folks as well. And one of the things that we're really pleased about is that the ECTA Center was able to support the commission in its work, as OSEP included something about that in our funding that began that year. That last section of the recommended practices was released in 2014, and that is the version that we are currently using. The practices were divided into 8 different content areas, as you can see here. So can you imagine that the previous set of practices had more than 200? And the commission then was charged and in their work to reduce the number. So we ended up with a total of 66 practices in all. And you can see here from leadership, assessment, environment, family, throughout. Each one of these has the exact number of practices that were included in that particular topic area. Now, one of the things that we thought, because of the nature of this, that you might be interested in taking a look at some of the family practices. And so Stephanie's going to kind of walk us a little bit through those.
Great, thanks, Betsy. So yeah, as you can see here on the slide, there are 10 family practices in the recommended practices, and they really kind of overarching 3 themes of those. Obviously, the first theme being family-centered practices, and that's about those practices that treat families with dignity and respect, that are individualized and flexible and really responsive to each family's unique circumstances and their individual needs. And family-centered practices really help support families to have the information they need that's complete and unbiased so they can really make the best decisions, informed decisions for their own family. There's also practices that really focus on the theme of family capacity building, which is kind of just what it says. It's about giving families information and building on their knowledge and skills and helping them to develop new abilities, new beliefs, and new practices. And then the third theme focuses on family and professional collaboration. And that's really the building those relationships between families and professionals who are working together. They have mutually agreed upon goals and outcomes, and are working together towards the same goal and same direction to support the development of the child, and also building family competencies. So what we'd like to do is actually look at a couple of the actual family practice, recommended practices, so you can see what those look like, just as sort of a flavor. So the first one we wanted to share with you is family practice number 6, and it, as you can see, says practitioners engage the family in opportunities that support and strengthen parenting knowledge and skills, and parenting competence and confidence in ways that are flexible, individualized, and tailored to a family's preferences. So which theme does this sound like it belonged to? Family-centered practices, family capacity building, or family and professional collaboration? And feel free to comment in the chat or the Q&A. Anybody? Okay. Well, I'll just go on then. This one actually really belongs to the family capacity building. Really speaks to building families' capacity. Perfect. Somebody did just type that in there for us. Thank you. Yes, speaks to building families' capacity so that they are, as if we remember what that language said, they are able to get what they need to be able to have information so that they can make the best decisions for their family and act on those decisions. So let's look at another one. Family practice number 4 says that practitioners and families work together to create outcomes or goals, develop individualized plans, and implement practices that address the family's priorities and concerns and the child's strengths and needs. So which theme does this sound like it belongs to? Family-centered practices, family capacity building, or family and professional collaboration? Great. Somebody said collaboration. Yep. Great. Somebody else said family and professional. Actually, yeah, so I think you could actually say this one belongs to more than one theme. We could certainly say this is about family and professional collaboration. This is also certainly about family centered practices, and I think you could also talk about it as far as capacity building as well, because they're getting the information they need. So while you might have looked at these two and think that, and you might have heard us talk about the recommended practices today and think that they are really focused on the practitioner, I really want to take a moment to point out that all of the recommended practices give you and give families some great language and some great wording about what they can ask for and what they should expect from their child's team and their services. And the language in the recommended practices can also really give you, as parent center staff or other professionals working with young families and young children, some really good ideas about how you could support a family to actively participate as an equal team member and in their and to better advocate for their own children. I think most importantly, maybe most powerfully, is if a family was to ask for something and can tie it back to the recommended practices, this is based on research. So you know, to be able to say, I'd like to see this happen for my child, and this is why. It relates to it's in the recommended practices, and the recommended practices are based on research. So I think these are just some really outstanding tools and that we can use in our work with families. So I'd like to actually give you an opportunity to take this opportunity to show you where to find some of these resources and let you know what's out there. On the next slide, just before you ask, I'll let you know the link to this page, the actual web link, is on the next slide. But this is what you'll see when you go to the page for the DEC recommended practices. What you see here, first of all, they're all available in English and Spanish, which is fantastic and a great recent addition. There also, if you see the glossary and then the recommended practices with embedded examples and an interactive glossary, there's a number of different ways that you can kind of dig in and really look at the practices and understand a bit more about what they mean and how families might use them and how that would look in real life. You also have the opportunity here, if you see where it says first 2 chapters of DEC aRPy Monograph 1. That's a place where you can learn more about the history and the process that was used for revising the latest edition of the recommended practices. So that's information there for you as well. the DEC website also has materials for purchase that support the recommended practices in their bookstore, and there is that link I mentioned to you. So using that same link, you're able to get to that screen that we just looked at previously, but you're also able to, you can navigate and get to the bookstore and purchase some of these resources if they're of interest to you, and you want to learn more about the recommended practices. So now I think it's time for your questions, and I think we're all going to kind of open up and take questions and try to field them the best we can. So what questions do you have, and what would you like to know?
Will help if I unmute. Hi. If you would like to speak online, if you just raise your hand and then we can unmute you, or you can type your questions in. Can you list the website that you showed on the 2 slides? Got it right there. So you can see that the link there is the decsped.org and then /DEC /recommended practices.
And at this time, the practices are available in both English and Spanish, always available at no cost on the website. We do have a hard copy available if people want to purchase that, but they will always be at no cost on the website.
I'll go back and show that link.
On the next one. Yep, there it is. Any other questions?
And it looks like that might be the only questions we have for today. As I said before, you know, this webinar really was, we wanted to keep it short because they really value your time, and we just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of introduce you to the recommended practices if you weren't familiar with them at all. We're going to be planning to share information about products and other materials and supports that are available in the next 3 webinars. Here you see the dates here. If you do not have these on your calendar, you'll be able to access them on the ECTA Center website. As you can see on for the next webinars, we're going to go more deeply into some of the actual resources and materials. And then on September 11th, that's when we're going to unveil our Ambassador Initiative for you.
Well, and I would just like to add too, I'd like to encourage you to go back to the DEC recommended practices link that we shared and maybe take some time before the next webinars if you have some an opportunity to just look at more of the recommended practices so you can see what the other 7 categories, what's in there and what's included. I think that might be a great way to just get a little more familiar with the materials.
Wanted to share our contact information and also to let you know that you are going to be receiving an email link to an evaluation. Please give us your feedback and suggestions for things you'd like to see us review and incorporate into the next webinars that are coming up. As Stephanie mentioned, take an opportunity to cruise our websites and feel free to contact any of us if you'd like more information on how to locate resources or any questions that you have. And as I said, these recordings will be available on the ECTA Center website in the near future. So thank you so much on behalf of the ECTA Center, the Region B Parent TA Center, and the Division for Early Childhood. Thank you for being with us today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and bye, everybody.
Thank you.
So before there was a question. All the webinars are going to be at the same time. So you say same bat time, same bat station, right? Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.